how do we know we've maximized student potential? What is our goal and our measurement of maximizing student potential? Because I think that's a really broad category. And so as I was
I agree. That's what I told Mr. Hatta when I saw the same thing. I thought it too. That's where I started with what I was talking about. I think that on page 10, I think we need a big bullet here with a link that goes to our AMOs. And says, here are AMOs for the year, here are targets for the year that we're defining from the state. Here, takes you straight to the data page to say, here are our objectives for what we're doing. And then also, as the district for us, which we will present to the board with recommendations or requests, we will come up, and Ms. Price's group will come up with, and I'll give the example again, okay, we're looking at language arts in elementary school. We define through the drill downs that there's a gap in phonics. We have a whole group of kids who never learned to read phonetically. We learn through memorization, and so we have kids who are in Apex or advanced classes, and they see a word that they don't know, and they don't have the ability to sound it out and determine what it is. So for us, then we will have a working plan as a district that we'll present to the board to say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're targeting, and we'll come with requests. Or we want to purchase curriculum, or we want to add staffing, or we want to do that and tie it back to our AMO, tied back to maximizing student potential, so it will all flow together.
And I like that idea. My only suggestion would be that we put it first.
That'd be great.
That we meet or exceed AMOs, and then you can click it instead of last.
That'd be great.
That would be my only 2 cents.
And I was going to say too, I know Mr. Hadow, you had on there that quarterly reviews with focus committees would be looking at those strategies. Do you have an idea how that's going to work with the committees? Is this going to be some of the same committees that we started with?
And we've talked about what this would look like and how it would work. I think the student data is an easy one for us as educators, where we're like, yes, we can track it. We have to track every student's performance. We have to show growth. We have to show achievement. I think for us, when we were looking at the other section, so let's go to, let's say goal number 2. So if we're looking at the HR, for example, one of the things that we're looking at quarterly is we are doing an analysis of where teachers come from. And so we've already started that process of how many of our teachers that we hired from Mississippi State, for example, were level 5 teachers. What are we seeing in the evaluations from different institutions, different schools? And we predict that we're going to analyze, well, maybe we need to get a lot more teachers from Mississippi State, depending on those results. Or maybe University of Memphis is really producing some quality candidates, and we really need to do more to recruit from that school. Or maybe and Mr. Hoover, you've talked about this too, let's get our own kids to come back to Germantown Municipal Schools. Kids who've graduated, maybe we can develop plans that will bring those back. And I think that's part of those quarterly meetings, to look at each of these other areas to analyze things. Let's look at our teacher evaluation data along with our hiring data to see, are we getting our best bang for our buck for each of those groups and those groups of students. And that would be the objective. Quarterly,
So build off the AMO concept, because I think I like that idea. So, one of our ways that we maximize student potential is we're going to meet or exceed the AMOs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could be one measure. I think there are probably others, because as I understand AMOs, you're really talking about moving kids that are not proficient or advanced to proficient and advanced. And so that's great. So we should absolutely do that, but that's about 25% of our population. So how do we get to the other kids to say we're going to maximize their potential?
That's where I think you're misunderstanding. It's not just proficient and advanced. That's what the value-added component is. We're looking at each cohort of kids, and we have to show growth in each individual student. And so
Okay,
it's not just, it's not the bottom, it's not just the top, it's across the board, it's all of our kids.
That may be one of our measures. That's not my understanding what AMOs are, but I kind of just heard about them tonight. So I'm kind of thinking about how do we, is that going to define, we talked about what's best, we want to be the best in the state of Tennessee. So
I think one of the things that I throw in there, not to hijack the conversation, maybe I'm out of place because it's really your discussion, but always visit competitions and scholarships. And I'm always trying to figure out, hey, what's that scholarship money looking like? And I'm not limiting myself to academic scholarships. I want to know what we're doing with fine arts. I want to know what we're doing with athletics. I want to know what we're doing with service scholarships, leadership scholarships. So if you ask, hey, a
Great
measure
idea.
of, hey, what's this look like and how do you differentiate the scholarships, that would be one piece that I would recommend. But even with that, I'm also thinking about, hey, Dan, not everyone is, the career readiness is just as important as the college. So then you start looking at competitions like the DECA and the All
HOSA.
Southwest and the HOSA, and you start to look at that feature, and you got to track, hey, how are we doing on this for the well-roundedness of the kids? So that would be, and that's in there of, hey, how do you track it? It's in the addendum.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I said, you know, how we, percentage of student scoring, you know, honors achieved in arts, athletics, and clubs, percentage of participation in clubs, in arts and athletics, ACT score, we should be the best high school there.
Well, I will say, hold on the ACT
cohort on
score,
ACT.
because we've had this debate. Why should we be the best ACT score?
Well, I think that should be our goal. Do we not want to be the best?
Well,
I mean, if we don't want to be the best.
But what does that mean?
We can
You
have
mean
that
the highest?
discussion,
You mean the
but
highest ACT score?
in the-
'Cause let me clarify.
In the state of Tennessee,
I can
for a
have a s-
non-magnet high school.
I
yeah,
can
we
have
should
a special.
absolutely
I can have a special
strive to
needs
do
child, and if I get them to have a 23 on the ACT, I have done phenomenal work. I have done something exceptional. And the assumption that a achievement gap is the only target isn't. And don't get me wrong, because I am. I want to be the highest ACT. The plan that I presented to you is how can we get the highest ACT? So I have that goal, but I think the realization is that when the state is setting AMOs, they're looking at cohorts of kids. And we may have one year where we have a 25 ACT average, and one year where we have a 23, one year where we have a 21, and the 21 may be the best year that we've had because of the kids that we have. And so I think an arbitrary number that is just picked isn't a true value. The state's doing that, and they're picking something rigorous. Since I was with Shelby County Schools, since I've been in education, we have never hit all the AMOs. Never. So it is rigorous. So I'm very hesitant and concerned about just picking a number or saying we're going to be the best, and what does the best mean? And be careful of saying, I want to grow every kid and for every kid to reach their highest potential they can. And what does that mean? It isn't a number. It isn't a 25. It isn't a 24, which is why I say every year we're looking at cohorts with AMOs. So
Yes,
that's
I
what I'm-
guess I kind of disagree with that from the standpoint of, if we're not going to strive to be the best, why are we sitting here doing this? And so, yeah, I do think there are objective measures that can tell us, are we getting toward that goal? We may not achieve it, but for me, it's a tremendous mistake if we as a board say, we're not even going to shoot for that. I mean, I think we need to be able to say, our plan is to be the best non-magnet high school in the state of Tennessee in terms of ACT score. Now, I don't know that we'll get there. We're pretty good right now. We're 4 or 5. I mean, I don't know where we fall exactly. We're really good. But why would we not want to shoot to be the best?
Well, I think we all want to be the best, but I don't think all of our kids are going to get a 36 on the ACT.
I agree. We're talking about averages. I mean, our average right now is 24.1. Is that what it is at Houston High School? So there are a lot of kids that do a lot better than 24.1. I mean, we're talking about averages. I think it's a worthy goal to say we should be the highest in the state of Tennessee. I think we should. I frankly think we should go beyond that. But let's start where we can. So I don't know what all those measures are. I mean, I think we can talk. I've got probably a dozen or so that I kind of picked out. But I mean, we can kind of talk about them. But I kind of was wondering whether that's really the piece of as I talked about, you know, where did I see kind of a hole, which is we got all these great strategies that support that initiative, but I don't know that we have a clear measurable objective to say, okay, we're going to be the best in this, and we measure it by this. And I'm troubled that I think we all want to be the best, but I don't know that I could clearly take this strategic plan and explain to someone and say, yeah, we're going to measure being the best by what Dan said. We're going to have the most success in terms of athletics, arts, and non-athletic competitions. I think that's a great measure. We're going to have the highest ACT score. We're going to have the highest AP pass rate of any non-magnet school in the state of Tennessee. We're going to have the highest number of percentage of students achieving scholarships. And I don't know, maybe the highest isn't what it is, but can we look at some of these measures and say, how do we quantify that? And where do we get to? And then the strategies that we put in here is going to help support us to get there. And I think it all kind of then fits together. And I think we got a great story because, I mean, I got involved in the Board of Education to say, I want us to be the best. And, you know, we're a really good school district, a great school district. But I don't want to just rest on that. I want to say, let's strive to set that bar really, really high. Because I think if we set it high, I think we can achieve great things. And so that's the only thing that, for me, that I thought was kind of an opportunity to really improve on the strategic plan is let's set some high bars and some high goals with clear measurables. And, you know, we may not quite get there, but boy, if we shoot for number 1 and we end up at number 2, that's really, really good.
I think there may be, and thanks for your passion, for your vision of what you want for the school district. There's a piece there, and they may not be aligned with, if I'm trying to personalize the education experience for the kid, and if I can see that this cohort group of kids, and I'll use the ACT for instance, has a predicted score based on data as they're coming up, and that predicted score is a 20. And if I say, hey, this kid, and I move them to a 23, is that success? Is that making the best for that kid, for that individual personalized kid? If I have another kid in my school, and he has an IEP, and I am doing a progress monitoring skills and goal setting deal, and if I get that kid to meet all his goals, but I realize that the ACT may not be his strong suit, have I reached success with that kid? Have I personalized it with that kid? Rather than taking a broad sweeping scope saying we will have the highest ACT, there's that tension point. It's personalization. Yeah, how do you do both, or how do you blend it? And
I don't think it has to be one thing. I think, you know, I mean, I agree with you that not every kid probably has the potential to get a 36 on the ACT. And I don't think that's really what I'm saying our goal should be. But I really kind of uncomfortable without setting a really high bar for us to try and achieve. Because I think if we don't, I think the risk is we're going to continue to be a really good school district.
Well,
and so I think as a board, that's what we need to do. As a board, we need to say, let's set some really high objectives and a strategic plan.
But I think that's what the AMO is going to do. And that's where I don't think you're seeing it. Our AMO is not, it doesn't let you sit. Our AMO, if we're at 24.1 this year, we can't sit at 24.1 next year. We have to go above that to hit our mark, to hit our target. When we hit the 24.3, the next year's AMO is going to be a 24.4. It's going to keep on raising that bar. So that's what I'm saying. This is every year we're going to keep seeing that AMO come in here and keep being the addendum that we keep adding to this document. And it is going to keep going based on that cohort of kids that's coming through. And
so maybe we need to spend a lot of time diving into AMOs. I mean, the first I heard about AMOs, I mean, I kind of knew what they were. You know, where we talked a lot about them was, you know, as you just kind of laid it out. My sense of it is deferring all of our goals to just rely on what the state says is great is probably not where we want to be. Now, we might say most of the AMOs, yeah, that's going to support what our strategic objectives are. Maybe it's all of them. I don't know. I'm skeptical because I don't think AMOs are going to deal with things like non-academic achievement.
correct.
So how do we make sure that kids are involved in athletics? How do we make sure they're involved in the arts? How do we make sure
Right.
they're participant in clubs? You know, I guess high school graduation rate's part of it, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that would be another one they came up with. And I don't know all the measures. I came up with a lot just off the top of my head. I think as a board, we should kind of fill those in.
Well, one of the things that was in there was the counseling. You know, to make sure that there's counseling there for the kids, to make sure that they're in clubs, to make sure that whatever problems they have, to make sure that they're talking to somebody about them, so then they can become involved.
And they have a report that they have to do that
Yes.
comes not only to the district, but also comes to the state. I think they had things in here too about keeping volunteer logs, service logs at the school.
Community service
I think there's
laws,
lots
yeah.
of great things that support what I'm talking about. I mean, I think that's why I was really happy about a lot of what's in here. I just, you know, every kind of strategic planning process I've been involved in a lot, if you don't have a clear, measurable, specific goal, you're never going to know where you get. And you're never going to be able, I think, achieve where you want to go without setting that out in front. And I think we've got lots of great initiatives and lots of good places we want to go, but I don't know that, I mean, it's hard for us, how are we going to know we got there? Because we don't have a measure to say, yeah, this is what we all said we were going to do, we measured it and we got there. Or we fell short. And I agree this has got to be a living document. We may find out a year from now that all those measures that we set, those were not the most realistic measures, or man, we really smoked it. But I think not to at least set the high bar and expectation would be a mistake.
I'm
So
gonna-
I'd like to
Yeah,
jump
go
in
ahead.
real quick. And I do want the first thing I say to be exactly what Dan's heard from everybody else. Thank you so much for all of the effort. It's clearly a tremendous amount of work that has gone into getting us to this point, and echo the observations about all the great stuff that is in here, some really fabulous ideas. I've been listening and thinking that we may be just a level too deep with where Mark has been taking us on. Well, what about ACT scores as a good measurement? Is that a good measurement of students maximizing their potential? So my question would be this. Let's move off of goal number 1 and talk about the second general planning area. How will we know whether or not we achieved our goal of recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff? How will we know whether or not we achieved that goal?
Right now, what we have is what I've done is I've compared the new teacher, I'm collecting data.
Mhm.
This is the answer. So I'm comparing the new teacher that we've hired versus the veteran teacher, and how are they performing on the team evaluation model, their overall effectiveness. And I'm looking at that to see, hey, was this a good teacher? Regardless of their years of experience, how did they perform? And what we found, and this is a piece that I did earlier in the year, is we found that it was really a 3.9 versus a 4. 3.9 meaning that a 3 is at expectation. I've taken my group of kids that have been assigned to me, and I did at the expectation level. In other words, this is what they're supposed to do, this is how they did. Well, our new teachers were at 3.9. Our experienced teachers overall was a 4. And that's just a micro example. Hey, this is how I know, hey, are we recruiting the right teachers? A first-year teacher really doesn't develop their game until, depending on what you read, until that 5th year, where they really get comfortable with the content, their vision, how to get the students engaged. So that would be a micro example. Hey, we had a pretty good year. But then the next question becomes is how do you develop that? And how do you develop that teacher to become a 3.9 to a level 5 teacher? And what do you have in place? Well, you start doing things and you start doing programs where you start to make that cohort of teachers, you heighten your awareness and you heighten the services you're providing them. So what do? You start doing staff development programs, you have the lead teachers, touching base with them, you have the master teachers, instructional coaches, you bring them out quarterly, you do some onboarding work to make them feel comfortable with the culture and the climate, and then you start to mirror and replicate good teachers that are your level 5 teachers that do some of the presentations with these teachers when you pull them out to the profession.
Yeah.
So if you ask, so here it's all merging of, hey, where are we going with this? So if you look at the bullets of what's going on, everything, the lead team, some of the stuff we're already doing, and we're just framing working, and now we got to collect the data. Hey, how is this working? And is there a better model, and what adjustments do we have to make? So.
Right, and you jumped into, we would do this, and we would do this, and we would do this, and if you look at if you go back and look at the training that we received back in November of 2014 when we started this process and made a commitment to plan, in that training, TSBA recommends that the staff develop the strategies and
The work
tactics
plan,
that
yes.
that are going to meet these goals. So that's exactly where I would expect you to go. We're going to PLCs and PD, and you had a great answer to the first part of that question. How do I know if I achieved that goal? Well, if my new hires are rating out at 95% of the proficiency team score of my seasoned teachers, I've done some good hiring, because they're going to grow beyond that over the next week. So is there an answer to the question that addresses develop? How do I know that my PD is effective?
Right.
What am I looking at to say my PD was effective?
You still, okay, so.
And then what am I looking at to say that my
I'll jump in on
retention
this.
was effective?
I think the objective for us is, where y'all are going is the next work product. So what happens once the board approves the strategic plan, what do we do? My objective is to have a working plan document that we create from this. So take each one of these bullets, come up with, and we talk about SMART goals, a SMART goal for each one to say, we want X number of our new hires to be testing at 3, 4, and 5 levels of proficiency. And that, like I said, that's my objective for us then to bring to the board, to say, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're doing. That becomes the superintendent's report about how are we achieving our goals, how is it tying together.
So the work plan would have, for example, let's say, who's the district's responsible.
Yes.
The timeline, as far as at a year goal, 2-year goal, 3-year goal.
Right.
And then maybe have a column that says you're at 50% completion,
And our goal is to
75%
move, yes.
completion, until that working plan shows 100% completion.
And it'll tie to this document.
Yeah, so we've diverged greatly from the training that we received in a couple of ways. From my perspective, I'm just one of the 5 board members. But if you go back and look at the TSBA outline of here's what the planning process should look like. Step 1, commitment to plan. We clearly did that. And tip of the hat to our chair at the time who spurred us to do that, because I don't know that anybody came to Lisa and said we need to do strategic planning, but I was really excited when she scheduled a workshop for us. Step 2 was define broad planning categories. And actually, it's not exactly step 2, but that's a component of step 2. And we got through that exercise the day that Tammy was here. When she left the room, we had these 5 things that we're now calling goals. And so when I say diverged, that's probably overstating things. What we have on the board as a goal is not what I understood when I walked out of the seminar that we had. When I walked out of the seminar that we had, I understood that we had planning categories and that Tammy had helped us cull that down into 5 categories. And I remember that as being a tremendously positive weekend. The 5 of us sitting around going, what about this, what about that? We had probably 13 or 18 things on the board, and we were able to pretty quickly get a consensus around 5 that we all believed in. It was, to me, a unifying experience for the board. TSBA talks about step 3, involve the community, which we have done. SWOT analysis, I don't think we've done, and I'll leave that alone. And then set goals. The board should go through a process of brainstorming, enlisting all of the potential goals that are suggested, then a system of putting priority on the goals should be used. I've always felt from the day we walked out of that room that the board would play a role in deciding what the goals were. It seems clear from the conversation tonight and previous conversations I've had with Jason and some of my colleagues that the staff has to play a big role in setting those goals as well. What's measurable, what's not? Is this measurement really valid? For example, I don't have my own personal experience and opinion of the team model. So if the staff is confident that when the team process delivers this teacher a 3, he's really a 3, and when the team process rates him as a 5 or her a 5, she's really a 5, if we've got confidence in that as an accurate measurement of teacher effectiveness, then that's something the staff would share with us. That's not something we would figure out on our own. But we've always had a consensus among the 6 of us in the leadership team. We haven't always agreed on everything, but one place that we've always agreed completely was that our goal was to build the best school district in the state of Tennessee. And I think to the extent that we've got any divergence of opinion here tonight, it might tie back to having never defined what that means. What does it mean to be the best school district in Tennessee? You know, I'm thinking of moving to Germantown. We should come here. We've got the best school district in Tennessee because we are this and this and this and this. And then I agree with Mark. We may not achieve that. You know, we may not get there in 5 years. But I think if we have a mutual agreement of what that means, then all the work that we've done here with all of these different strategies and tactics will flow into, just as you said earlier, it'll flow into supporting that overarching goal of being the best, and the subcategories or general planning categories, those 5 broad areas that have new teacher evaluation, average new recruit evaluation as one of the ways that we'll be able to tell that we achieved that goal. And I'll quit here after this next thing. a strategic plan must include measurable objectives. So it's not an addendum, it's not something that you add after you adopt the plan. That's actually the first part of the planning process. Putting it at the end is okay. But we've got to identify measurable objectives before we adopt a strategic plan, or it's not a plan. It's just a list of things we're going to work on. That's just a central element of a strategic plan. And I feel real strongly that we've got a lot of great stuff here. We're near the finish line, but identifying those measurable goals, I think, is a critical step before you put a bow on this and say we've adopted this strategic plan.
What group did you work with on the?
21st century facilities. 21st century. Yeah.
Okay.
21st century classrooms and schools.
Are the AMOs, are they not goals that we have to hit?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's okay, I want to go back to some of the things that Mark had mentioned about, I don't remember all of them, but you talked about like scholarship monies and clubs
And those are just things off the top of my head.
Right. But a lot of those things, I think, I've heard of them discussed. My groups were all under Goal 1, Student Potential. So I spent a lot of time with district office staff in multiple meetings, talking about things. I'm at the school level, talking to students, talking to teachers, talking to school administrators. So I've kind of been living and breathing this goal for the past 18 months. And a lot of the things, Mark, that you brought up were discussed at the school level. For example, I know there were several times I'd hear Mr. Cherry say things like, I want to increase enrollment in honors or leadership academy, or I now want to grow this fine arts academy idea, or I want the scholarship money to be bigger this next year, or I would hear him talk about these things. And so I think a lot of what I hear Mark saying, I think is, I don't know if it's on a school improvement plan.
They are.
Okay, so but I feel like I heard a lot of what you said. Those discussions happened at the school level, and that passion for we want growth and improvement and more enrolling and more scholarships and all that stuff, those conversations happened, and I heard them happen. The other thing I want to say is I'm concerned, and I want to caution us to put too many numbers on kids, because I feel just my own experience working with kids as an interventionist, you can't say as a successful kid you're in 3 clubs, you have a 3.5, and you've got $150,000 for scholarship money. Those are totally random numbers. Because, as a reading interventionist, my goal was to have somebody that was reading on grade level fluently and with confidence. There's not a single number attached to that, right? So I'd have one kid come to me, and at the end of our time together might be reading on a 13. But gosh darn, he was awesome. And he sounded good, and he was confident, and he was ready to re-engage in his classroom. Had other kids that were on a 16 or 17. So it wasn't necessarily, I'm done with you when you hit a number. I'm done with you when you meet this goal. And so there may be some kids out there, which I think the counseling piece really means, that for them to be in one club and engage in that one club, that's what they can do. Because they've got, other things going on. For them to get a 15 on the ACT or a 17 or an 18 it was huge. For them to just pass the 10 ready is huge. I think it's just I just want to caution us that we don't want to attach too many numbers to kids, because I think there's a lot of individualized stuff going on, and I know that the document kind of talked about personalized education experience, and I was really excited to see that.
So tie that back around to, do we need to be able to measure our progress towards our goals? And do we need to have a target in mind? You said don't put numbers on it.
I feel like the board is the overarching vision, and the 5 areas you set were big, broad goals, and that's what I was trying to show you at the beginning is, yes, are we going to have measurables? Are we going to have targets? Are we going to have those? But that's when we drill down to the district administration, when we drill down to the school improvement plans, the district improvement. That's why I'm looking at this document where we have to take each of our numeric areas and talk about how are we addressing each area that we didn't hit the growth. What plan are we doing with that? Is it a phonics program? Is it changing our math curriculum that we're doing? We have to analyze that every single year. And so that's why I worry about that we're trying to take something that is at this level down in the true measurements, and y'all are trying to bring it up to the highest board level. It's hard. And I also don't want to take autonomy away from Mr. Bond or
Sure.
from Mr. Prokosky about they know their student populations and how they're growing their kids and what they're doing. We try to also give them their ability to develop their own school plans. So that's why I'm having the difficulty in defining at what point are we setting, like you
Right.
said, putting a number on kids, are we setting goals?
But I'm still back to the question of and, I believe that's a broad planning category rather than a goal.
Right.
But, okay, let's say it is the goal. How do you, I actually think what Dan described would be more like a goal, that our new hires are a very high caliber, that our new recruits are very high caliber teachers. That's the goal, to hire the best. How do we know that we hired the best? Because they perform very close to experience levels in their first year. That's how we know we hired the best. So the question I'm still stuck on, Jason, is should we be able to measure the goals that we set for ourselves, whether we call recruit, develop, and retain the goal, or if that's a planning category and we have 2 or 3 goals underneath that? Should the strategic plan, when it's adopted, include the ability to measure, did we achieve that goal? Or what's our target? What are we shooting for?
But I think we're lost on what's the difference between goals and strategies again. I was trying to count the bullets. What are there, 12 bullets here? When you look at a strategic plan, you're talking about 5 goals. And that's what we did do with Tammy Grissom. We identified 5 big goals. And then from this, that's where the district staff is taking the strategies. And like I said, this isn't something that we're divorcing the board from.
Okay.
It's just, you're giving us our marching orders.
So I'm
And saying-
surrendered on, is that a goal or is it a strategy? I mean, I don't think there's any way Tammy would have walked out of the room and said, we're on step 6, skipping over the SWOT analysis and the community involvement and all of that. But, okay, that's a goal. Does the strategic plan need to include the ability to describe a target we're trying to attain?
If you go to the
A
addendum,
measurable
those are
target.
targets.
A measurable target. So what is in the addendum that's measurable with respect to goal number 2?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So for us then, we will bring you a working plan. So what we will say, like that's what Mr. Hatt was talking about, quarterly meetings to say, okay, board, we're going to talk about goal number 2 at this meeting. So let's take each of these bullets and let's say, okay, here's what we were trying to hit. Here's our objective. Did we achieve it or not? Here are the new hires that we had. Here are their scores.
Yeah, and can we step back for a sec? So I agreed with something you said a minute ago, and I agreed with what you said now. I think we got to be careful not to put numbers on kids. I mean, I agree with that. But I still think we need to get back to how do we know we've achieved what we're going to achieve? And you said we're going to have that. We're going to have those measurable goals. That's just going to be the next step. And so I just have a difference that, no, I think that is this step. We need to have, our strategic plan needs to have specific measures